and a mission that's so powerful and will resonate generations on. Just a little background. I was diagnosed in 1986, and for all of those of you who are doing their math really quickly, I was 2 years old. Diagnosed 1986, and at the time, that was the height of the AIDS scare. HIV was known as a killer, as it should be. Nobody knew why, nobody knew what to do about it, nobody knew whether you could shake people's hands, whether you could converse with them in the same room, you could drink out of the same water bottle. This was a very scary time in the medical arena. People were worried, and they were worried for a very good reason. My mom and my dad were married right out of high school. They were 18 years old. 12 years later, they decided to have me. They were pretty middle class. They did, graduate in the 70s, so they were definitely hippie youth. But they had fun. They didn't do anything too risky. So when my dad was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS and given 6 months to live, it was a shock. My mom had no idea what to think. She ended up getting tested, and the test result came out positive. And then, of course, I had a 50-50 chance. We all know now that I was positive as well. With HIV, it's a tragedy for any family. Anyone who becomes infected, it immediately falls into a tragedy. At the time, nobody knew what to do. My dad ended up dying shortly after, 3 months later, and my mom and I were left with nothing. Literally, the doctor said, you have maybe a year we can predict, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. They just shook their hands and they said, or their heads, they just shook them and said, we can't help you. So at that point, my mom said, I'm going to do the best I can with my daughter and raise her in the best light. During this same year, Elizabeth Glaser was out there fighting against Congress to approve medications for pediatric youth. At the time, there was only AZT. It was one medication that was given for those who were dying. And my dad ended up taking that. They had no idea what to do with it. They over-medicated him. They really had no options. So Elizabeth Glaser was out there fighting in hopes of getting this medication to the youth community, to those who were both born with it and infected through blood transfusions. So 2 years later, at 5 years old, I was able to start AZT. And my mom to this day says that that's what really saved my life. That's what gave me the chance to grow up. If I didn't have that medication made available, the reality is I probably would have gotten much sicker. So when I think of Elizabeth Glaser and the foundation, what it stands for, it really represents the life that I've been given the chance to live. If she hadn't fought so hard, and ultimately she did lose Ariel, her daughter, if she hadn't fought so hard, myself, along with numerous other kids who were both born with it and transfused in the early 80s, wouldn't have had this fighting chance. Of course, I grew up not knowing I was HIV positive. My mom decided to keep it from me in the hopes that possibly there would be a cure. She could give me a different fortune. She didn't know how to explain to a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, by the way, you have a deadly disease and we don't know if you're going to survive or not. Don't tell anybody. So, of course, I grew up not knowing. And I grew up in a really great environment. My mom allowed me to do anything a normal kid would. Around 9 years old, it started to catch on. I started to realize that something wasn't right. I was at the doctor's twice every month. It depended on whether I was sick or not. Constantly taking medications. My mom was very overprotective. Always very, very tiny. For those who are born HIV positive, we tend to develop a little slower. So tiny, short, petite, never gain weight. It was a constant problem. I was in, 6th grade and I looked like I was a 2nd grader. So I started to realize something was wrong. And I started asking my mom, and she finally broke, and she said, the truth is your dad died of AIDS, we're HIV positive, and you cannot tell anybody from this point on. So I grew up living a double life. I grew up with people around me who did not know, in my school, in my community. And this is what happens with a lot of people who become HIV positive. They end up balancing these two realities, the sick role and the healthy role, because there is that horrible stigma. And unfortunately, it very much still persists. At the time, it was far worse, particularly in Los Angeles. And I had to contend with it. And at the same time, I had a great life. I definitely met some amazing people. I was fortunate enough to be in an environment where people cared about me and loved me and offered me the world. And I grew up prospering in that environment. But at the same time, I did see the reality of the disease and what it did to people. I lost so many friends. On a given month, I would lose one person a month, maybe sometimes, I don't know, average 10 people a year I would know. Didn't matter how old they were, didn't matter how they got it, didn't matter how long they had it, they would succumb to the disease. So this was the reality I grew up with, and it was a shock, but at the same time I embraced it because I was so fortunate to have the privilege to meet all these amazing people and share the experience. And with Elizabeth Glaser Foundation, they're extending it from the domestic world to the international aspect. My biggest concern is the low-income nations, where there's a vast majority who are being born HIV positive, and they don't have the opportunity to survive. They're not given the medication, or they don't even have the opportunity not to be infected because that medication, again, Nevirapine, 3TC, there's a collection of them, aren't made available. So that's really what we have to focus on, preventing HIV from continuing. And another thing Uma had mentioned and she touched on, because I don't want to leave you on a sad note, because it's not a sad note, it's a celebration. It's definitely a celebration of life. We are in a generation, I'm proud to be in this generation, where change can emerge and where we can really not only fight the stigma, but prevent it. Now I'm 24 years old. I've been very, very fortunate, been very healthy. I've been on medications my whole life, been in and out of the hospital, but for the most part I can't complain. But I look at my generation and I'm so worried that they do not realize that it's out there, that the disease is still very much there. You have to treat everyone as if they have it. Now I've transitioned from being the innocent victim to, oh my God, she's deadly, stay away from her. But and it's just one of those things. You just have to transition. But that's a reminder. I want to be a reminder to you that anybody can have it. You have to treat everyone as if they have it. You do not know. And stay safe, that's all. It's just being conscious and being aware and communicating. It's all about strong communication with your partners and who you care about. And that resonates with your future lifestyle. And furthermore, what you guys are doing here is amazing. It's amazing for the next generation of kids. What you're doing will have a reflection on a child somewhere in the world 20 years from now. They are able to stand up, live, breathe, have a life, have fun, enjoy their existence because you guys are here on this dance floor, dancing, working for a cure, and working for a wonderful organization that promotes that. So I just want to say thank you so much. Party hard, dance hard, don't quit. Continue on, and come back next year so I can see you again. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Cristina and Uma from the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. And now the time you have all been waiting for. Do you know what time that is?